Hi, everybody. My name is Sabrina Silva. I'm one of your co-hosts for tonight's panel. Thank you all for joining us. It's really great to see a crowd already here to talk about this really important film and this important issue. I'm the director of the No Plastic Please campaign from Humane Action Pittsburgh. Humane Action Pittsburgh is an animal advocacy group focused on seeing Pittsburgh as America's model humane city, and we do a lot of different types of animal advocacy, and one of those is around the issue of single-use plastics, education, action, and policy on single-use plastics. So really excited to be co-hosting this with Allegheny CleanWays. Before we jump into the panel, I want to just quickly orient folks around Zoom in case you haven't done a Zoom webinar before. So the first thing is this webinar is being recorded and will be published later, so just so everybody here knows that. We are able to see the chat. All the panelists can see what you put into the chat as long as you select all panelists or all panelists and attendees. But if you have questions that you would like the panelists to talk about, we would really like you to use the Q&A tool. If you move down to the bottom of the screen, you should see a Q&A option. Select that and then enter your questions. As other participants, other audience members, you should be able to see the questions that are being asked and even upvote questions and comment on questions. So we know that we have a very informed and diverse group that's coming to be part of this, this panel. So if you have suggestions or additional comments on questions that are being asked by other audience members, feel free to contribute links or ideas or information that you may be aware of. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Danny, my co-host.
Hello, my name's Danny Kramer. I'm the program coordinator of land-based programs at Allegheny CleanWays. Some of you know me as Dumpbuster Danny. I'll be fielding your questions, and we're going to start with some introductions of all the wonderful people on our panel today. So we'll just go in order of who I can see on the screen. So first up, Jordan, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
All right, hi everybody. My name is Jordan Toney, and I'm a sustainability consultant. Professionally, I work with More Recycling, which is a research and consulting firm primarily focused on tracking trends in plastics recycling and developing tools to help catalyze the path forward. Our company's been in the industry for over 20 years, and we've been putting out the annual reports for the US and Canada on plastics recycling for the last 10 years. Some of our data was actually referenced in the film. Personally, I've been an environmentalist for most of my life, although at an early age, I didn't really know what that meant. The main landmark in the neighborhood that I grew up in is a coal-fired power plant, and we had a landfill about 100 yards from my house. My mom used to clean soot off of the windowsills every week. So our impact on the environment has never been something that's far away or secret to me. So the environmental justice aspects of the film really hit me personally. And so for some good news, that power plant was decommissioned last year. So making progress.
Cool, thank you. Next up is Myrna.
Hi, I'm Myrna Newman. I'm the Executive Director of Allegheny CleanWays. Our mission is to engage and empower people to clean up litter and illegal dumping in Allegheny County. And we do that through land-based cleanups, primarily illegal dumping and litter. And then we have river-based cleanups, riverfront cleanups. And obviously we find tons, literally, of plastic in our cleanups. Last year, we actually did an audit of a systematic audit with a lot of volunteers, many who are on this panel, of what we found, the waste and brand audit that they talked about in the film. And we counted about 12,000 pieces of trash, and of that, in everything, 67% of it was plastic. That doesn't include textiles. 67%, most of the textiles were plastic, had synthetics in it. And then in just the riverfront cleanup portion that we did, that 89% of that was plastic. And most of that was non-recyclable plastic, actually. So, yeah, so this is near and dear to my heart and what we do, and it's, we would love to see our numbers go down, obviously.
Next up, we have Maren.
I am, hello everyone, and thank you for joining. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool multidisciplinarian. My academic training is as a planetary scientist, but these days I'm mostly doing environmental education and activism on climate change and air quality and energy and land use and food and plastics and sustainability in general. I'm on the board of the Group Against Smog and Pollution, a 50-year-old air quality organization here in Pittsburgh that's been working through policy advocacy and legal action and public education in a lot of different creative ways to clean up the air for many decades, and we're still at it. Also on the steering committee of 350 Pittsburgh, part of branch of Bill McKibben's climate organization. Pittsburghers Against Single-Use Plastic, along with Sabrina. And Ohio Valley Environmental Resistance, which is addressing plastics at the source by doing direct action protests around the petrochemical build out, starting with the beginning of the petrochemical build out, the massive Shell ethane cracker plant in Beaver County. And a little bit later, I can show a little bit of what we've been doing, doing some creative distance protesting, in part to protest Shell's lack of distance. And I could show that if you wanted now. I actually have a 14-second drive-by version. Would that make sense, Sabrina? Danny? Or?
Maybe 14 seconds. Maybe we should get through our introduction.
I can probably find a context later where it will also make sense. So, yeah. And I organize and host a monthly environmental education event called Sustainability Salon. It's kind of a potluck mini conference, usually, except for the last 5 months and the foreseeable future, it's on Zoom. Number 103 is coming up a week from Saturday, and it's on part of a 3-month series on economics. We looked at the terrible economics of the whole fracking and petrochemical industry, which is leveraged to the hilt and under criminal investigation, and compared it with what's going on in renewables, looking at local economics. And the one next week is on social investing at all scales, from where you bank to if you have a portfolio and everything in between. I may, if you have friends that didn't get a chance to see this film, I am likely to do a screening, virtual screening, and another discussion in the winter when I usually do film screenings. Also, in a resource list that I'm sure the hosts will tell you about soon, I maintain an online listing of environmental and social justice events. It's by no means exhaustive. There's so much going on even during a pandemic, but it's a place to look for things if you want to find out what's going on in the region or what's going on in any particular day or week. So, popcorn to the next.
Great, thank you, Maren. Next up is Stephanie.
Hi everybody, I'm Stephanie Wein. I run the Zero Waste and Conservation Programming at PennEnvironment. So we are a statewide people-powered environmental advocacy organization with offices in Pittsburgh and Philly, and members and activists across the state. And so we have been really involved in the fight against single-use plastics from the municipal level, working on things like Philly and Westchester's bag ban, to working on extended producer responsibility legislation at the federal level, and which I'm excited to talk about later. And that's what spoke to me most about the film. I thought that, one, I love that it ended on the solutions and was really focused on policies that give us a place to go. A lot of these films really can just be the problem, and we want that other piece, the solution. And I also really liked how it connected this to the climate crisis and air pollution. You know, this is not just what's piling up on our riverbanks. It's loops into almost every sort of piece of our various environmental crises.
Awesome, thank you. And last but not least, Omoye.
Hopefully I'm muted. Hi, my name is Omoye Aikhuele. I'm a recycling specialist with the city of Pittsburgh. I'm focused a lot on building up programming to help shift the city of Pittsburgh from a, an all commingled system at the curb to, having people think about where they're taking their items. If they can't take it somewhere, maybe what kind of lifestyle choice they can make to, maybe lessen the amount that they consume, or, switch it up altogether. Right now, we're working on, enacting code that we had passed last year, where we are reducing the amount of bags that you see at the curbside films that end up dunking up the system at MRFs, causing costs to the city. Addressing what is accepted at the curb, the residual waste that people think is recyclable but ends up just going to the landfill instead. And also just, educating the public about, ways in which they can, small changes that what they can start at to make a bigger change in the end. So yeah, you're just trying to make City of Pittsburgh a better place. And also on the Clean Pittsburgh Commission, where we're working on empowering people to, look at their communities and come together and with help from the city, make their communities cleaner and more equitable. So that, the city of Pittsburgh can be the beautiful place that we know it can be. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you all so much for being here. So it doesn't look like we have any questions yet. I want to encourage everyone in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen to go ahead and start asking your questions to our panelists about film. In the meantime, maybe we can go around and each of you could just kind of touch on what you took away from the film and what you felt was most important. And maybe we can go in a different order. Let's go backwards. Maybe would you like to speak again? Oh, you're muted.
There we go. I pressed the wrong collection of keys. So, I mean, the movie definitely reiterated things that I had already kind of known and learned by working in the recycling industry. But I think the visual that was placed in, in conjunction with the knowledge that I have in my head really made it honestly, it really hits closer to home when I'm thinking about my dad's ancestry in Nigeria, where they are, there's a struggle over their oil resources. Not only are they, hit by the wastefulness of like the sachet or, just the smaller quantities and worse packaging. They are, dealing with power struggles over natural resources that are contained within their boundaries. And it was really striking. I was watching it with my partner, and these are things that I have talked about all the time, about how we can, reduce the amount that we consume, or look for alternate resources or ways to obtain such things, but also the equity aspect, and how we as first world countries always look to other countries as it's their problem. And that in conjunction with, you know, the nations that are fighting back in a way, like China's, you know, national sword, and what led up to them having to put that policy in place. So I think it did a good job of, you know, rounding out from the start of extraction and how that affects those communities, and, you know, when it becomes waste and it affects certain other communities, and the complete story that it affects us all as individuals on the planet, the ecosystem that we reside in, and that we interact with every day, and that no one is safe from the everlasting impacts of fossil fuel extraction and the forms it takes after the extraction. So yeah, it was, you know, I'm still processing because I just watched it recently. So I mean, I think there's always going to be things that come up in my mind from here on out that you know, that lead me to explore more and figure out ways to use that knowledge gain to make impactful change.
And we've got a couple questions coming in. Should we keep going around and everyone can have a chance to just say a bit before we get into the questions?
I think these are some pretty great questions. I think we should get to them.
Okay, that sounds good to me. We'll start at the top here. Jack asks, what can we as individuals do to help support a reduction in the use of plastics and getting our government to vote against government bills that support the plastic industry or oil and gas that feed the plastic industry? I'll pose that to whoever would like to answer.
Vote.
Go ahead, Jordan. I'll follow.
Oh, that was it. Just vote.
Oh, vote. Yeah, no, definitely vote. I can talk a little bit about this. I spend a fair amount of time in Harrisburg, and I think it's really telling that there are two sides to this coin. One is that there's all this plastic being pushed out by these industries, and one of the reasons is because natural gas is so cheap. And we, time and again, have seen here in Pennsylvania specifically, our legislature vote for combinations of subsidies and tax breaks that prop up this industry, as well as rollbacks of environmental regulations geared at protecting our air and our water and our health that make it even cheaper and easier for the industry to do business. And so I think when we look at what the best policies are, there's two categories people should look at fighting for. One is, if natural gas wasn't so cheap, plastics wouldn't be so cheap and they wouldn't be flooding the market with it. And so the best thing folks can do on that front is when you start seeing, when you see bills come up or you see budget proposals, or you hear from groups like PennEnvironment that there's bills and budget proposals that make fracked gas more accessible and cheaper, those are things you want to be telling your state senator, your House rep to vote against. And then there's policy handles that sort of put the onus back on the producer, like extended producer responsibility that was talked about at the end of the film. That being the idea that if you're a company, you can't be creating something that you don't have an end of life vision for. And we actually already see this with batteries because we know they're really toxic and they're dangerous. The industry worked, I think, decades ago to put together a process for recycling your batteries so that there is an end of life vision for where that's going. We need that for more industries, including single-use plastics. And so the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act in Congress is a really good example. But there's also versions in the California state legislature and I think in Washington state that are seeing more and more support. And those would be a heavy lift and sort of a longer term solution in Pennsylvania, but that's sort of the gold standard of policies we can support to reduce, put the onus back on the producer to stop flooding the market with so much of this stuff.
British Columbia has a really good program to years ago now. So that's a wide one that look into as well.
There's the point was made in the film about the huge subsidies for fossil fuels that occur in all kinds of different places in the marketplace, in production tax credits and many direct subsidies, but also a lot of places where it's just offloading the cost of offloading the health, the environmental costs, the or in this case, the disposal costs. And the film pointed out that, and it made an interesting juxtaposition that the industry was going to put a whole $1.5 billion into trying to improve recycling situations, which just isn't going to go very far when you have so many different, I mean, one municipality could spend that much to improve their system to be able to handle all the ridiculous stuff that's being thrown at it. And meanwhile, the fossil industry is getting $5.2 trillion in subsidies every year, which is why fossil energy can even compete with renewable energy. And it is why virgin plastic is cheaper than recycled plastic products, which is, we do have the technology to recycle some of the stuff that's used, but there's no market for it because the virgin is cheaper, because the fossil fuel extraction is so heavily subsidized. And Pennsylvania, talking about vote and advocate, we just had a big loss in Pennsylvania where the House and where a bill was passed to subsidize basically anything that uses natural gas, which includes fertilizer plants, so that we can explode like Beirut and Texas long ago, and many other places in history. Nitrogen fertilizer is the same stuff as TNT, and so it's explosive, and when stored all together, it can create, I mean, hundreds of people died in Beirut, and tens of thousands were made homeless, I think, with just fertilizer warehouse exploded. And so that's a bit of a digression, but at any rate, $670 million was allocated by the state as subsidies for these companies that are for-profit companies that are causing health problems, causing climate problems, and that's insane. There's another advocacy opportunity which is linked in the resource list. Sabrina and Danny, has that been pointed out yet? There's a resource list. It's like a Google Doc.
Yeah, it's posted in the chat.
Okay, look for there. There's a link to an article about House Bill 1808, which passed in the House fairly recently, which kind of disguises incineration, trash burning. What one of the people in the film remarked, there's a whole lot of crap in there you don't want in your air, and other waste to energy mechanisms as recycling. They're calling it chemical recycling. And so if it has not yet passed the Senate, I believe it's going to be voted on this fall, and it's a long reach because the Senate is less progressive than the House at the state level, as well as at the national level. But a lot of people voted for it thinking it was, oh good, it's recycling, we'll vote for more recycling and better recycling and more advanced recycling. I think it may be something rather advanced recycling bill. But really what it is waste to energy. And when you turn waste to energy, you're either gasifying the plastic and then burning the gas, or you're burning the plastic. In either case, you're releasing a lot of pollutants into the air. And fortunately, for Western Pennsylvania, we haven't had to face that. They're doing a lot of that in Eastern Pennsylvania, and I know Stephanie has been involved in the fight on that. And so you can probably say more. It was a PennEnvironment article that I linked to in that resource list.
Just another perspective on chemical recycling, just to round it out. I don't think that it is the silver bullet that industry is trying to paint it as, but it's not always being used for fuel when it's broken down through pyrolysis. There are companies out there that are using pyrolysis and methanolysis and glycolysis to break down polymers into smaller parts of the chain and then repolymerize them, and they are recycling them into end products. I think right now a lot of the existing technology is being used for fuel, but I just wanted to clear up, it's not as cut and dry as that, and that is where they're probably intentionally muddying the waters, and I just wanted to paint the full picture there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
But in 2018, none was being repolymerized at a commercial scale, which is the most recent data that we have. And so it's sort of, there's a lot of futurism sort of in the plastic to plastic version of the technology.
It's sort of like carbon capture and storage as an excuse to keep burning fossil fuel, but it's not happening it's extremely energy intensive and thus expensive to do it, and can lead to other problems down the line. You have a whole lot of carbon dioxide in an underground reservoir. When carbon dioxide comes out in large amounts, it's very toxic. So there have been huge mass deaths from underground reservoirs of carbon dioxide just leaking out through a lake somewhere, and everybody in the village died. So that's not something that you want, and it would be much better to get your energy some other way by not subsidizing the fossil.
We have a question that's gotten a few people would like to hear an answer to this. Marion asks, our grocery store was really good with reusable bags, but now because of the pandemic, they won't handle them. Is there any information that I can give to them to say that reusable bags are okay? Now I'm getting a half dozen plastic bags every time I get groceries.
I don't think any of us are, COVID specialists. So, I mean, I didn't really look up any or know of any information about bringing your own bags in the grocery stores. But in my going to the co-op, which is where I do most of my shopping, they, as long as what the answer is as long as you bag yourself, they tend to be more okay with it. But yeah, like when they see my bags, they're like, oh, you're gonna bag yourself? I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll bag myself. I mean, that's the way I approach it, in the same answer that Natalie provided, but I'm not really sure of many other ways. I do go with paper if it's an option, but there's always that, paper or plastic, which is better. We would like to avoid plastic, so I think paper I can at least compost with, but who knows really.
Another option that I think actually I saw on the co-op's website is to not bag it at all until you get out to the car. Which is what I do when I go to a Giant Eagle, is I just put it back into my cart and then take it out to my car and put it in the in bags there.
And things that are, again, I also shop mostly at the co-op, and things that don't have to be weighed, I don't put in, at the co-op, they usually, you could put things in your own bags, but with the pandemic, they're saying don't bring in, I'm talking about like a plastic bag you would put a head of broccoli in or something versus a carrying grocery bag. So the co-op is fine with the carrying grocery bags, but they don't want people to bring in individual bags for products or your own jars for grains or something, because you would be putting your jar on the spout of the gravity bin. And I doubt that's much of a transmission pathway, but they're exercising caution. But say if broccoli is by the pound, they'd have to weigh it. But if broccoli is by the each, by the bunch, I just hold it up and I either put it in my own bag if I have one. Yesterday, I just didn't wait until I got home to put it in a bag, but I just held it up and said, here, 2 heads of broccoli. And so I do put more stuff into my own bags, but just keeping track of what needs to be weighed and what doesn't.
And one thing that I think is good, I can actually send some resources that are COVID specific if people are interested. And I think we have, our national team has been working with health experts to put together, have consulted with over 60 international public health experts about what should be the anti-single use response to the COVID crisis. And I think the most important thing is to remember that there's actually no confirmed cases of surface-based transmission, period.
Yeah.
And that's from the CDC.
Yeah.
But what I think is really telling is that in the first week of the pandemic, the American Chemical Council, which represents petrochemical industries, was actively meeting with the heads of large supermarket chains like Giant, convincing them to temporarily abandon the reusable bag programs or bans on single-use plastic. And so we actually, like, the door has been slamming shut on single-use plastic, and the pandemic is quite cynically used as like a foot in the slamming door. And so these are like really insightful solutions for what to do in your own shopping. But I think also talking to your grocery store, going to the grocery manager, going to the owner, bringing them the science. And what's interesting is when they say plastic reusable bag spreads germs, all the data is about E. coli, which is a bacteria, which is very durable, which behaves very differently than an RNA virus. My background is actually in zoonotic epidemiology before I became an organizer. So like side note. But then, and then the one study they keep citing that viruses can be transmitted by reusable bags is one time a woman threw up in her purse and had norovirus, and then a week later, without cleaning it thoroughly, brought in cookies to a community group, and then that community group got norovirus. And when they say that reusable bags spread viruses, that is the single case study that is often cited. I kid you not.
Oh.
So take this with you when you go next time you go shopping, figure out who the person is you can talk to push back against that messaging, both for your own cart, but then also what that store is doing systemically, because we're going to have this virus with us for a long time.
Someone in the, back to the personal shopping habits, and lest we presume that everyone is shopping at the food co-op, which would be a fine thing. Daniel mentioned that in the Q&A that Trader Joe's will allow you to bag yourself, but you have to tell them before they start ringing you up. So I don't know what the situation is at other stores, but it's certainly worth a try, because that's a lot of plastic to go through. But we have to address it systematically. We can't just say, oh, I'm going to avoid 10 bags this week because there's 8 billion other people. And even in Pittsburgh, there's, I don't know, however many, 1/3 other people that aren't doing that. So we need to address it with Giant Eagle and Pass Up and No Plastic Please, who are both dealing with the plastic use and sort of the supply side of the equation. We've been encouraging and stores, in particular large ones like Giant Eagle, which is a lot of the groceries in this region are bought at Giant Eagle, and to do their stepwise plastic ban approach, or plastic bag fee or ban. I think that in Pennsylvania, so many people don't want to be told what to do, especially outside of the cities, that a fee or a credit, a discount if you bring if you do bring your bag, it may be better than an outright ban. Because that, you know, people may go back to their car to get their bags or whatever, or remember to bring them the next time, because it's worth money.
So we're at about a little over halfway through our panel discussion. I want to see if we can get to a few more of these questions. Ash asks, the movie talked about how the plastic industry relies on poverty to operate. Any ideas on how we can make this little known fact more public? Do you think it would help to change people's perception of recycling and consumption of plastics?
Is that referring to the waste pickers in Southeast Asia? I assume.
I imagine it could have referred to a lot of the people that are, you know, in the fenced neighborhoods that are near, you know, plants or near dumps or working in dumps. It's an issue of people in poverty and with less power everywhere, I think.
I mean, I would say it definitely negatively impacts impoverished people from the production side. In the recycling world, I would say the only way that it relies on poverty is by those jobs are not fun. So, you know, some people could say exploiting folks who are desperate for work. I mean, I've been in a ton of those plants. I do not like being in the plants, and there are people that do that for 30 years. So, yeah, but I don't know. I mean, the alternative and something that's been coming up a lot recently are advanced recycling or advanced sorting techniques. So there's basically like robotic arms that can pick out things that the traditional equipment can't use. So it's kind of, you know, you weigh technology displacing people who their only job in the area is hand sorting at a MRF, or you're, you know, or the flip up on that coin is you're you know, taking that industry out of relying on taking advantage of people who don't have any other choice. So I don't really know what the answer is. But I will say that at least your recyclables that are being collected in the US are, very few of them are being exported to countries where there are people like walking around in knee deep sorting through them. Like, I don't know if anybody saw the documentary Plastics China. That had some really upsetting images of kids living in piles of trash. That really isn't as common these days, just because they really did shut down the exporting of waste from the US and Europe. But yeah, that's all I have on that.
I think, you know, I don't know that I have an answer, but I think that certainly as we're looking at justice issues right now, and there's such a, you know, there's more of a lens being focused on justice issues just in general in the United States. I think there's certainly an opportunity to talk about how plastics affect poor and marginalized communities, not only in Asia, but also, you know, around the world. And so I think there's, you know, to Ash's question, I think there certainly is an opportunity for that now. And it's really up to us to start getting that message out more. I'm not sure how to do that, but I think that there, you know, that's what's one of the things we're going to be working on, I think, in the coming year.
I think that when we talk about plastics and poverty, the national sword policy that China refusing to take our plastic exports and sort of some of the other countries following suit, it is interesting because in the short term, it's been a crisis for our municipalities because they don't know where to send things, but it actually forces a reckoning that's been a long time coming. And when I've met with, especially some of the more conservative members of the legislature about the plastics crisis, you know, they'll point to numbers that say most of our waste comes from, you know, 7 of the 10 rivers that send the most waste to the ocean, they're all in Asia. And I'm like, well, where do you think a lot of the plastic waste in Asia is coming from? And so this is actually forcing us to do a little bit of a reckoning. And, you know, we in our large and powerful economy can pressure the system to improve. And so one of the solutions I think is actually already happening, which is that we're forced to deal with it more at home now. And in terms of the plastic in our own communities and poverty in our own communities, one of the things that we've heard again and again when fighting for things like fees on single-use plastic bags, 10-cent fees, 15-cent fees, that we know severely reduce use, is that the plastic industry loves to say that this is a regressive tax on the poor. And the communities I've worked with, especially, so I'm based in Philadelphia. I used to live in Friendship in Pittsburgh, but now I live in Philly. And we heard that again and again in Philly City Council with the bag ban. And until at the hearing, almost every person except me was actually from a low-income neighborhood, saying, one woman sharing that, you know, there's more plastic bags in Kensington than there are birds flying around in the air. And that powerful, powerful testimony came from neighborhoods saying, don't fight good legislation and then point to poor people and say that's why you're doing it. And so I think if you want to sort of have an intersectional conversation around plastics, making sure that people who can say, you know, not in my name, don't do bad policy and blame poor people. You know, we're here from the poor neighborhoods and we want progressive policy. That is, I think, the most powerful argument that can be made. And as Pittsburgh and other Western Pennsylvania towns consider ordinances, that's going to be a really important part of organizing.
Our next question is from Cami, and they ask, how does the city work to implement a zero waste program? How did cities like San Fernando and the Philippines, shown in the documentary, even begin that process? Anybody?
Go ahead, Omo.
Well, I mean, okay, so yeah, the city of Pittsburgh, we are working on becoming zero waste by 2030. It's a long process. It takes a very close. You need to look from within. Look at your city. Look at how the city's policies were informed. A lot of that comes from, I guess, looking at state policies and what lets what lets a city go for so long with, you know, low tipping fees at landfills, with I don't know, also packing our recycling, the bales that are produced out of a recycling facility with residual things that should be going to landfills. We're looking at that and how we can start with, I guess, looking at what people know. People are mostly familiar with recycling, you know, a slow incremental change. One of the questions was, how are we addressing plastic bags? You know, we are looking at rolling out bins to all residents of the city. It's, you know, giving these residents the tools to empower them to, I guess, look to make further change down the road. One of the big things that we are discussing behind the scenes is like, how do we begin composting? How do we begin, like, how do we even decide where we're going to put a composting facility at? Who are we going to work with to pilot such programs? And also, I think it does take the voice of the resident bugging their council member to finally just, hey, environmental services, why aren't you guys doing this? How can we as a council, how council representatives can, you know, help assist in that journey? Just one example is, you know, we have an environmental services in the city of Pittsburgh. We do have household hazardous waste and electronic waste collections. That came from, you know, finally a push from a council member in the West End neighborhoods who was like, what can we do to get this started? I mean, we've always wanted to do it, but like, I think, you know, getting the council on board to help allocate the funds to get, you know, such things underway really helps. So I think it's a long road, but I think it's, you know, with seeing who represents you and bugging them. And, you know, I think from the ground up is where we get things going. I don't know if I answered that very well, but those are some of the ideas that in my head, how we can, you know, move to a zero waste city. And I mean, having the mayor on board, he spoke it out loud. So I think, you know, making all the moving parts come together to make it a reality is what, you know, leads a city to a zero waste city.
And I think you also have to, because not everybody sees this as, you know, even in their top 5 or 10 issues that they care about, you have to make it as easy to compost or recycle something as it is to throw it on the ground or throw it away, because I don't know what the percentage of people are that aren't going to necessarily take the time to figure out where, but that's also really important. And that was kind of the impetus behind single stream. We didn't really for that to capture all. Yeah, that, I guess that's more of a zoomed out answer than, oh, am I freezing? Oh, never mind, somebody else go ahead.
And I think the politics of, you know, when you see a profound shift like in San Fernando, it comes because, and there's other examples internationally that like, it's a combination of us electing people that want to make this their marquee issue. And that comes from there being people in the community that want to take away someone's job over this. Like they will vote someone in or out based on their environmental policy. And historically, it hasn't been one of the top issues people vote on. It's moving up and up and up as our crises get higher. And so there's what Omoye from the inside, like what can we do? But then there's also on the outside, you need to create a climate that the policymakers that pass the policy, they feel like they have to, or there's going to be consequences for them. And so they do it under pressure. So that's sort of the necessary like cauldron for that.
Ooh, we've got 10 minutes left. Our next question, I got the most votes from the audience. Oh gosh, we have a lot of them. Our next one here, 50% of plastic in the ocean is from the fishing industry. The film never addressed this at all. What are your thoughts on reducing consumption of fish to save the oceans from unnecessary plastic pollution?
I think the Ocean Conservancy report that came out 2 years ago concluded that it was 80% of the ocean plastics were sourced from land-based sources. So I don't know that that's entirely accurate, but I think it was previously thought that most of the ocean plastics came from the fishing industry, but that's kind of been debunked a little bit.
And there are discussions spearheaded by groups like Ocean Conservancy about changing materials of fishing equipment and marine practices. But yeah, the first thing, it's like there's more and more land-based plastic every year. So even if the fishing nets stay the same level, their percentage will go down and down because there's more land-sourced plastic. People really don't like to be told what to eat. You know, you want to talk about, and people don't like to be told what to throw out, but they really don't like to be told what to eat. So that politically becomes a much harder lift. So if there's other mechanisms that we can use to get at the issue of nets and go, like, because there's a lot of problems with a loose net in the ocean. It also ghost fishes, it kills more sea life. And so the pressure on the industry, Yamaha that makes motorcycles and keyboards also is involved in a lot of marine equipment manufacture, and there's a public pressure campaign on them to change how much nets they lose. And so I think going at it that way versus the diet way might get you further. But obviously it's still a piece of the picture, even if it's not 50%.
Okay, what do we have next here? Sorry. How best do we contact our state representatives in a way that actually gets their attention? Is phone calling their office effective?
I don't want to just keep talking. I wanted to share. I always think that anytime they're hearing from us, it's impactful. And then there's different ways that are more impactful. I always say that a phone call is worth 10 emails. A handwritten letter is worth 10 phone calls. And in non-COVID times, a visit to their office is worth 10 handwritten letters. And last week, we got a couple dozen people to reach out to a few Senate offices and about House Bill 1808 that would include pyrolysis and gasification under recycling. And we heard immediately from all the Senate offices that had received just a handful of calls from their constituents, Senate offices reaching out to us and asking for more information about the bill. And so I always say that's really powerful. Calls, especially, someone has to answer them. Someone has to take a message. It actually takes up time in their day. It can impede the functioning of their legislative office. So calls, if you can make them, are really, really powerful. And physical letters, you know, they can like sort out emails from their inbox. Physical letters, they have to physically deal with. Calls, they have to answer. So those are ways of anything that can sort of get in, they have to address it. And that's always powerful. But legislators will ask their staff, you know, how many yeses and how many nos are people emailing about this? And even just being part of that tally is a really powerful thing.
And even a petition is sort of the lower, these automated petitions or things where an organization will send a letter, an email in your name are less effective, but still better than nothing, because you are being counted in the yeses and nos. You're not taking anybody's time, but you're being counted. And there are some policymakers that are just wedded to climate denying fossil subsidized situations, but they still have to hear from us. So advocating is super important, and joining organizations that are contributing to organizations that are doing, like to PennEnvironment, to GASP, Allegheny CleanWays, and also the No Plastic Please and Pass Up and Over and all of those others, to help do the work, because somebody who's in the thick of it and spending all day working on that can really be that much more effective. So supporting organizations is important. Most of someone just asked, are the organizations listed? Not all of them are. Breathe Project, I don't know if we got a link in there. Will we still be able to update that with afterthoughts, Sabrina?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. And if folks wanted a little, were questions of what can we do about the cracker plant, and what can we, who's working on it? And I answered that in the Q&A section with a bunch of organizations, some of whom I also just mentioned. I do have to show what Over's been doing, which is really very graphical, if you wanted to show that.
And we'll often let people know when a big vote is coming up on something via I get in trouble if I don't mention this when I'm at an event. If you text Zero Waste PA, 3 separate words, to 21333, that's Zero Waste PA to 21333, we will shoot you a text when these critical moments are coming, so that you know when to take action and when your voice is most critically important. And I'll put that in the chat right now.
think we might have time for one more question here. And yeah, everyone will be getting that resource list, and please feel free to reach out to any of these organizations afterwards with questions that we weren't able to get to. But if we can really quickly, how does Pittsburgh deal with getting people to understand that bags do not go in the recycling bin in addition to other non-recyclables? In my area, I see people's bins overflowing with bagged recyclables and wish they would not pick it up when it obviously holds non-recyclables.
All right, yeah, so we've been strongly discouraging the use of bags. A lot of it has been held up by our code, which we have to have passed by council, and there are some council members who want, you know, they think, well, accessibility, people are very tied to their blue Giant Eagle bags. We are moving away from those, but you know, there are some people who have, I guess, the math in their head somehow works out to, you know, buying a box of blue bags as opposed to buying a bin, which would last longer in the long run, save them some money. But, you know, we are with rolling out these blue bins. It's going to be a staged rollout, but in that we are, you know, bag free by 2023. And we are working on the code to accompany that, so that people know that bags do not belong in the bin, and, you know, also including the messaging that the bags aren't doing anyone any favors, especially when they make it to the MRF. There's a lot of lost time, there's injuries, there's, you know, there's fees incurred. There's just a lot of that comes in with using a bag in the recycling can. So it's a lot of education. We've been working on it, and I think we've been stymied by the pandemic, but things are slowly starting to roll out. And the Pittsburgh DPW Twitter just showed a video. I'm in it, and we're just trying to instruct people that you know, these items can be placed in a can without bags. And while we understand a lot of people can't afford them, they are forthcoming. And they will be making it out to the city of Pittsburgh residents. And as always, I didn't add this to the resource guide, but I'm sure you can find an email or just call in the Pittsburgh recycling office. We do have someone in there every day doing shifts. So it's just 412-255-2631. I guess I can add that to the chat box. And a lot of times you get forwarded to me and we can talk it out. I have no problem spending a lot of time talking to people about recycling. So I'll add that to the chat box. If you want to reach out to that number, you know, eventually get forwarded to me, we can have that conversation. To even the person speaking about yogurt, we can talk about it as well. I don't eat yogurt, but we can we can brainstorm. So, and I think that's what a lot of this ends up being. It's creativity in finding your way to cope with and adjust to a bag-free, plastic-free lifestyle. And it's baby steps. You don't have to be so upset about not making the change immediately, but just thinking about it and finding those options that work for you and what you can move forward with.
I will say we worked with a couple of cities that were trying to get people to stop bagging their recyclables, and the most effective thing we found was cart tags. So it's just a little sticker that the hauler slaps on the top of the bin if they were bagged, and that really gets people to change their behavior. I did have one question. When the city is ordering a lot of garbage carts, are they going to contain recycled content or require the manufacturer to put recycled content?
Yes, nice. They are containing recycled content. We made sure of that. So we even had to change the color of the can just slightly to you know, get more of that recycled content into those cans.
Awesome.
So we're at a little bit past 7. There are a lot of questions we didn't get to, and it looks like the chat was really active. I wonder do you think we have, Sabrina, time for like any closing remarks, or should we say thanks and sign off?
I think going around, I mean, if anybody has to leave, that's fine, but maybe we can go around, and if there's any question that any of the panelists saw that they want to slip in an answer for, or recommendation for that, I think that would be a good time to do that. Does that sound great, everybody? Amenable?
Sounds good to me. So if we want to do just a quick go around again, I can pick people at random. Myrna, did you have any closing thoughts?
No, I'm just thrilled that this happened. So grateful to all of you. On behalf of Allegheny CleanWays, thank you. And yeah, please share it. And I hope that people do take the opportunity to post another one and really start spreading the message.
Jordan?
I just want to thank you all for setting this up. This has been a great conversation. I linked to two resources in the document that's going to be shared, and they're where you can find companies that are using post-consumer recycled content to make products, and there's a business. If your company has a purchasing manager, or if you want to reach out to local government, you can point them to that directory and they can find maybe just a few things that they can replace next time they have to buy something with recycled content. So I encourage you to go check that out. Maybe there's something in there that you buy every month and you never realized you could get one with post-consumer plastic.
Maren, any closing thoughts?
I think the biggest root cause is the externalized costs that are being offloaded from fossil and plastics corporations onto people, from the early on the beverage companies making that crying Indian ad that they had a tiny bit of in the film. Oh, it's not us, it's litterers. And it's not us, it's Asian countries who are receiving all of our stuff. And poor people who are getting it from both sides, because they're having all of the usual environmental justice issues of being forced to live near polluting facilities. And that guy with the dairy farm next to the giant landfill in the film he said they're told that they have 15 or 20 fewer years of life individually, and being taken advantage of with all the sachet purchases. So they're selling people little tiny quantities, one single use of shampoo that is going to be more expensive than a bottle of shampoo, and that they probably were perfectly well washing their hair with bar soap for the last 2 centuries, and they don't need fancy shampoos and fancy perfumes and fancy laundry fabric softeners they were touting in those little sachets. So just how important it is to work at deconstructing the system that causes that allows that externalization by subsidizing and externalizing, direct subsidy, giving industry money and externalizing costs so that they don't have to worry about it. And I guess I may okay if I do that little share now, Sabrina, Danny, is that?
Can we add it into the resource list?
It just isn't in a place for various reasons right now, but don't worry about it.
We can probably we can find a way to share it with folks after after the discussion, I think.
Don't worry about it. Okay. So making the point that the public's best interest is not what the companies are thinking about. What they're thinking about is their bottom line and their profit, and they will do whatever it takes to maximize that.
Omoye?
Yes, I did want to do one small answer. I don't know if Brian is still in the room, but we do not have, this is a question about why aren't we finding people for not sorting their materials. We don't go can to can just yet. We we have personal issues sometimes with not having the workforce to do such things. But when our drop-offs, we hope people follow the posted signage and sort accordingly and play by the rules, follow the rules. It makes it better for all of us. But I just want to let people know that not to be just too discouraged, but to find the place in which they can really use their voice and provide that activism that is necessary to get the ball rolling, make those small changes in your life, call your representative, hold them accountable for the things that, to represent you, and to, find find the ways in which you can make those small bits of change to make the world a better place in the face of corporations that don't want to make the world a better place. So Godspeed. Good luck.
And Stephanie.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys, and thanks everyone who came out and spending your Friday with us. Yeah, I think, again, it's Zero Waste PA to 21333, and we'll just keep you looped in to our work on this and on climate. They are related. And then just remembering that it is freaking awesome if you bring your reusable bag, but it's even better if there's less, if we get some systemic solutions. And I think if everyone can come away with that in mind from this film and from this conversation, it'll have been a really great use of everybody's evening together.
Great, thank you all so much. Thanks again to everyone that was a part of the conversation and watched the film. And thanks to Sabrina of No Plastic Please for partnering with CleanWays on this to get it all organized.
Yeah, it was such a powerful film, so I'm so glad we did this. And really great to have all this group of people, and there's so many people in Pittsburgh working on this issue, so if you do want to get involved, there are avenues to get involved and to take action beyond just your personal stuff. There's so many groups that are doing so many different angles on this issue. One housekeeping note, there is a survey that the Story of Plastic folks would like attendees and viewers of the film to see, and we'll send that out in the email. It's also listed at the top of the resource doc. So if you're willing to fill out that survey, that would help inform how these events are run for Story of Plastic and how impactful the film is.
Can you remind people that there's still time to view the film if there's anyone that hasn't yet? I think there were a couple of people.
Yes, that's a good question. Is there still time? Last time I looked, there were 10 screening slots left. But if you signed up through the reservation, there's 4 left. If you have not seen the film, go now to the link that was sent to your email, and you have until 11:30 a.m. tomorrow, or sometime at least 10 p.m. tonight to watch the film. Although hosting a screening is free, and so if you thought this film was powerful, or if you missed it, you can try to organize another hosting. And I believe Maren mentioned that she's going to be hosting a screening potentially this fall. So there are actually some screenings listed on the Story of Plastic website as well. So if you do miss the slots from our screening, you can probably sneak into another one.
There are also some other films about plastic that some of them focus on different aspects of it, but they're all quite powerful. Plastic's Paradise is one of them. There's some about zero waste lifestyle. Maybe we can try to add a compendium of those films and where to find them in our resource list. Yeah, the Empty Bin Project, which has websites. There you go.
There it is.
On top of it. So we'll get that into the resource list as well.
Okay. I think that's that. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.